I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason.
Golden Spiral Media presents the Friday the 13th rewatch.
Jason, Mother is talking to you.
Join Cory and Nathan each week as they slash their way through campgrounds, woods, Manhattan, hell, and space as they discuss another installment in the Friday the 13th franchise.
Hey, wasn't that the road up for Camp Crystal Lake back there?
Send us your feedback at goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback. Like our Facebook page at facebook.com/rewatch podcast. And follow us on Twitter at rewatchpod.
Legend has it that Jason came back to get even. Every now and then, the murders just start up.
Today we're discussing Jason X, starring Lexa Doig, Jonathan Potts, Lisa Ryder, Dov Tiffenbach, Chuck Campbell, Melissa Aid, Peter Mensa, and David Cronenberg, with Kane Hodder as Jason/Uber Jason, so I see they call him, directed by Jim Isaac. Welcome back to the Rewatch Podcast. I'm Cory, and I love premarital sex.
Do you? Really? And I'm Nathan, and I couldn't be with a girl whose balls are bigger than mine. Hello, mate.
Hey, mate.
How are you?
I am feeling pretty good after watching this movie, actually.
It's the 10th installment in our Jason Friday the 13th rewatch. Is only this one, and then Freddy vs. Jason, and then the remake that they did in 2008 or 9 or something like that. So I hope everyone's watched it, because this is going to be an interesting chat.
I think so, yeah. So before we get into it, of course, we want to remind you that we are part of the Golden Spiral Media Podcast Network. So send us your feedback at goldenspiralmedia.com/feedback. You can type a message, you can use the SpeakPipe widget, or you can even call 304-837-2278. And also head over to facebook.com/goldenspiralmedia and follow on Twitter at GSM Podcasts. All right, Nathan, let's get into Jason X, beginning with the trailer.
Cool.
In the year 2455, on a routine training mission, a team of students is about to discover a life form frozen in time.
Wow. They're on their way back. Prepare for docking and power up the lab.
You brought him on board?
Everything's under control, ma'am.
What the hell is going on?
Jason Voorhees, that's what's going on. He's an unstoppable killing machine.
Guys, it's okay. He just wanted his machete back.
How do we get off the ship?
I don't know. Look, we're gonna be all right.
What? Are you high?
Uh-oh.
He's here. You have got to get them out of there.
Hey, Slappy!
I think we're finally okay.
What the hell is that?
You've got to be kidding me.
Oh, wow.
He's been modified.
Oh, you think?
You guys might want to run. I don't think he's out there.
Why don't you just stick your head out and have a peek?
Alright, welcome back. Jason X was released on April 26, 2002, and the film made $13 million in the US and earned roughly $3.8 million overseas for a worldwide gross of $16.9 million. The film was released on DVD on October 8, 2002, and it was actually released on Blu-ray in 2013 with all of the films in the Friday the 13th, the complete collection set. So as per usual, to kind of put it into some perspective, the film was released on April 26 and was up against such titans at the box office like The Scorpion King was in its second week of release. Changing Lanes, the Ben Affleck, Samuel L. Jackson vehicle when Ben Affleck was kind of in Nowheresville with his career. He was kind of making movies like Reindeer Games, but that's okay. He was still making money. Jason X debuted at number 3 with $6.6 million in its opening weekend. In its second week, it then dropped to number 9 with a 65% drop, only earning $2.3 million. And in the second week of its opening, it was coming up again. Such genuine box office behemoths like Spider-Man opened the following weekend to $114 million. So I can't imagine there'd be too many people thinking about Jason X during this period. What do you think, Cory?
Well, I have to say, 2001, I mean, this was me at my peak horror fandom.
Really?
Yeah, Scream had come out about 5 years earlier, and it had kicked off my love of horror films. And this would be the first time that a Friday the 13th movie, well, you know, not that title, but Jason X is coming out, and I could go and see it in the cinema. I was so excited for the release of Jason X, but it did not get wide release in Australia. I had to travel all the way from Newcastle to Sydney to see this movie in a cinema.
You are committed, my friend. You really wanted to see this. You wanted to see the metal mask, didn't you?
So, yeah, take that for what it's worth. But, yeah, I was so hyped for Jason X back in 2001.
This is a strange film in the canon because, I know they've tried to kind of step outside, like, the mythology of Crystal Lake and all that kind of stuff, like, once or twice during the series. But this film, they genuinely leave most of it behind for something entirely different. And without giving the game away, I found it refreshing.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, and we'll talk about the timeline when we get into the discussion. But yeah, they really do. They just drop everything and sort of just open it up, assuming you know who Jason is already.
Now, this is the first film in the Friday the 13th series to rely on digital effects for death and gore shots. So, I mean, all the previous films have been practical effects, give or take. I think there was a couple in the earlier, the one before this, but this is genuinely everything was digital, and I didn't really pick it up too much, to be truthful, like in terms of the death and gore shots. I mean, obviously there was some there were actually heaps of VFX shots in this and a lot of digital stuff, but the kills, I didn't really pick up the digital stuff. Did you?
Well, you know, this is, I think, the very early days of like heavy CGI, and it was being used heavily in television. And the makers of this film are Canadian. And Canada is very renowned these days for hosting a lot of sci-fi television. You know, they've got a lot of VFX houses out there that do sci-fi TV, especially for Sci-Fi Channel. So, yeah, you know, these guys were kind of pioneering that thing. And back in 2001, I think they've done a pretty good job with it. From what I understand, this is the first film to actually be edited digitally. So it was still shot on film, but the whole thing was scanned in digital and then edited that way.
It's interesting you said that this is all made by Canadian kind of filmmakers and actors and whatnot, because there is a big, sizable cameo right at the start of the film by the very famous David Cronenberg, famous for The Fly and Dead Ringers, Existence, and various other films. In fact, I think the filmmaker himself, Jason Isaac, and when I was looking at his biography, he was actually involved he was a special effects artist. He actually worked on Existence in 99. He actually worked on Gremlins back in 1984. But generally speaking, he's been like more of a horror guy than anything. So he finally got his big break to direct a film, and he's still making films now, although not quite as often. He's only made 2 films since Jason X in 2001, Skinwalkers in 2006, and another film called Pig Hunt in 2008. Both films I've never heard of. So I don't know about you. You may have heard of them.
No, I haven't. But yeah, you know, Cronenberg being in the cameo here at the beginning, obviously a favor. Cronenberg is a Canadian, so he really likes to help out his, you know, Canadian brothers in the film industry. So yeah, he kind of dropped by to do this favor, does a bit of a cameo. Plus, he also really loved the idea that he was going to get killed on screen in a movie.
By Jason, no less, too.
Yeah.
So it kind of shows us how cool of a guy he is. I mean, it shows that all his kind of success and fame didn't really go to his head too much. He was still happy to help where possible and you know, just like he does do acting gigs from time to time, but they really are few and far between. Like it's really rare that this kind of happens.
Yeah, I mean, this movie, by all accounts, I mean, apparently the production of this film was very smooth. You know, we've talked a lot over the last 10 weeks of discussing these movies about how there seemed to be like a lot of creative headbutting going on, right? But by all accounts, I mean, these guys wanted to make this movie. They had this idea. They got the rights to use the Jason character and go ahead with it. They made it, barely got cut down to get an R rating, you know, maybe just a couple of seconds here or there. They were really able to just get out the vision that they wanted to.
Which is really strange, the fact that they didn't have to cut it down too much, because I mean, the gore factor and the violence factor really goes all over the place in this whole series. Some films are super violent and really intense. This film's violent, but I didn't feel the violence nearly as much as I did in the previous film, which I thought was actually quite violent and a bit gory and not quite comfortable to watch, if you know what I mean.
I agree, but it's a loving homage, you know. They definitely wanted, they had a few ideas that they ended up having to scrap. There was talk of getting Betsy Palmer back to do a cameo as Mrs. Pamela Voorhees.
She really kind of must dislike the Friday the 13th series, like, privately, because even though I remember we've had this conversation before about she does appear at conventions and she's kind of accepted her fate, for use of a better term, as, you know, this being one of her more remembered kind of roles. But throughout the course of Friday the 13th series, she's been offered a few times, not just once, at least 2 or 3 times previous to this, to come back in whatever capacity. And for whatever reason, she's always said no, or she's asked for too much money, and the filmmakers have just ended up moving in a different direction. But Betsy Palmer, in this instance, apparently she was doing a play in Toronto at the time Jason X was filming. And according to Palmer, one of the producers actually contacted her about possibly reprising her role. They did not come to an agreement, and the character was not included in the film. So who knows what discussions were happening behind the scenes. I suspect she was, I mean, you know, I don't want to speak out of turn, but she may have been being difficult. I can't imagine she really wanted to come back, yeah?
Plus, you know, that to an extent, this is a bit of an indie production, you know. I can't imagine the budget was too high, so that could have also been a factor, you know, if they want to sort of play off her fame, you know, in a way. You know, she is famous for this series, so to get her back would be quite the coup.
Yep.
So I could imagine that money could have been involved there, but who knows? Yeah, it's not like she was too far away. She was there in Canada at the time. She could have stopped by for a day to do a walk-on. There
certainly is a history of whenever any actor asks for a pay rise, they just immediately get written out of the script, because for whatever reason the producers really don't want to pay anyone any more than they have to. Because these films, I think they do okay. I think they all make money, but I don't think they make heaps of money.
There it is.
There is obviously a big influence on these films. Apparently the screenwriter Todd Farmer actually based much of the film on Alien, even naming one of the characters Dallas after Tom Skerritt's character in the Ridley Scott film.
As soon as they showed all those like army guys, I was like, this is such a take on Aliens.
Oh yeah, totally. And I was down with it, man. I was down with the ride. I mean, I think I sent you like a sneaky text like a day or two ago when I watched this, and I said, dude, are you watching this film? Like, it's actually not bad.
Yeah, there's a couple of other little things in there that I noticed too. The ship that they're on is called Grendel, which is from Beowulf. There's that space station that they're supposed to get to, which is called Solaris. So, you know, that's very big in sci-fi, Solaris. So, yeah, you know, they throw some sci-fi stuff in there and mix it in with the horror.
Apparently, in 2010, Discovery Channel's the very famous show Mythbusters actually tested out Jason X's liquid nitrogen head smash kill. It turns out that it actually didn't pass the test. They couldn't get it to happen for whatever reason. I actually don't recall that episode. I've seen my fair share of Mythbusters, but I don't recall them doing that.
I did see that episode.
Did you? There you go. Nice. During Jason X's development process, director Jim Isaac and producer Noel Cunningham, who was actually Sean's son, and if I recall, didn't Noel Cunningham play young Jason Voorhees in the very first Friday the 13th? Is that correct?
No, that was Ari Millen, if I remember correctly.
Oh, yeah. For some reason, I vaguely remember Noel Cunningham playing a role of some description, but I could be wrong. I'll have to check my facts. Don't email us, guys. Okay, all right.
I think maybe we talked about he was supposed to be in one of the movies, but Sean Cunningham's wife talked him out of letting him do that. Yeah,
I think that rings a bell. Now, producer Noel Cunningham and screenwriter Todd Farmer, they apparently kicked around any scenario they could think of. Typically, Jason in insert such and such, whether it be like Jason in the snow, or Jason underwater, or Jason in the Arctic, or Jason in LA fighting gangs, or Jason on safari. Apparently, they even considered something involving the NASCAR circuit. Farmer suggested in space because he knew Freddy vs. Jason was on the way, and it would be best if Jason X was actually set after the events of that epic battle. So they needed to jump into the future, and going into space certainly did that. They were a little scared of doing a horror sequel in space, but they thought it could be fun to do a mashup of Ridley Scott's Alien and James Cameron's Aliens, with not one but two strong Ripley-type females on a ship of badass space marines hunted by Jason instead of xenomorphs. And you know what? If that's what they were going for, they did kind of achieve that. I mean, I'm not going to for a second compare this film to Alien and Aliens, but it did smell like that, and as far as like a rip-off of those movies, they do a fairly decent job with it, yeah?
Exactly. This is a loving homage, and it's not just to Friday the 13th. But yeah, they do bring in those sci-fi classics. It's shorthand, really, to make you feel better about this movie, because, I mean, come on, they're sending Jason Voorhees into space. I mean, that's tongue-in-cheek, so why not pay homage?
And most importantly, they give Kane Hodder something to do, because in the previous film, he just appeared in the mirror, man, for 5 minutes during the film, and then he appeared for 10 minutes at the end, and that was it. Yeah. This film, he's all throughout it.
Which is definitely a good thing.
Exactly.
All right, so should we get into our discussion of the film?
Let's do it.
Okay, so going to the timeline of this movie. So apparently this actually opens up after the events of the next movie we're going to watch, Freddy vs. Jason.
Okay, interesting.
So it actually opens up in 2010.
Yep.
So the year before, 2009, Jason was captured and then taken to this facility where he was convicted of over 200 murders. Then they tried to execute him for over a year. He wouldn't die. So that's when this whole idea of freezing him came about.
Yep, and that's when we meet our, government scientist, Rowan. The actress is Lexa Doig, straight from the set of Charmed, might I add.
Hey, Lexa Doig gets around in all kinds of, sci-fi stuff. Again, she's a working actress in Canada.
Sorry, I shouldn't be so mean, but like all of the females in this film look like they were just from the TV show Charmed, if you know what I'm saying. Like that, they all had that kind of look about them.
She's still working today. She only just recently showed up on Arrow, the DC show. Yeah, she's playing Talia al Ghul.
Oh my! Did she really?
Wow, yeah. Nice. So, nice, but I've seen her in tons of stuff. She's kind of like a sci-fi TV staple these days. When you see Lexa Doig show up in the show, he's like, oh, that's so cool. They got Lexa Doig for this role.
I gotta say, man, she's cool, and she's got presence, and she's kind of a badass, and she knows what she's doing. So yeah, I quite liked her as our kind of hero. So we meet her, and she's kind of desperately trying to freeze Jason after, as you said, several failed attempts at actually killing him. So as she's kind of walking out of the facility or whatever it might be, she bumps into David Cronenberg playing a Dr. Wimmer, who basically says to Rowan, I don't care what you say, we don't want to freeze him, we've got plans for Jason, we're going to take him. And Rowan just kind of looks at Dr. Wimmer and says, what are you doing? Like, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, he's a maniac, he can't be controlled, we've tried killing him, you're not going to win, essentially. And David Cronenberg says, well, I don't care what you say, it's my call, that's exactly why I went over your head, I knew you'd say this, so it is what it is, we're going to take him. And she says, well, how are you going to take him? And Dr. Wimmer says, well, I think these guys can handle it. And he's kind of surrounded by like 3 or 4 like Marine type people, and they kind of storm in to Jason's area. Now keep in mind, where Jason is being held, it's like this ginormous room, and it's only Jason by himself, and he's being guarded by one guard, isn't he?
Of course he is.
Yeah.
But I like this, you know. It's like, to sort of get you in that sci-fi feel, is that they've latched onto an element of Jason, which we already know, is that he's just this undead killing machine. So the fact that this doctor comes in and says, no, we're not going to freeze him. His regenerative skills just beg for more research. You know, it's this sci-fi aspect of it all, you know.
Yeah.
We need to find out why he doesn't die, why he's able to regenerate, and yada, yada, yada. So I like that. It gives you that feel, that sci-fi feel that we're going to go with. And then Jason himself in this movie, you know, I think they pulled it back a little bit.
Yeah.
Especially from that last one, the Final Friday, where like the mask was like embedded into his face and stuff. Like they'd just gone way overboard with the look of Jason. So here, I think they've pulled it back to probably about part 6. You know, that first one where he was resurrected.
It's funny you say that, because it was the first thing I noticed when I saw Jason. I said, that mask doesn't look quite as big on him, and he just feels to like the mask. He just seems to be a bit more measured with the way that he's kind of presented, where the previous film, you're dead right, man, they really go all out with making him look really disgusting and totally over the top, and for some reason his mask is melded onto his face and it can't be removed and all that kind of stuff. And this film, they've definitely kind of measured his image a little bit more, and I think it works heaps better. Like, I mean, Jason's always been menacing, but in this film he's a stone cold killer, man. Nothing can stop him. Yeah.
I know, when they've got that one guard watching him.
And doesn't that guard make the mistake of like taunting him?
Yeah, he calls him like a little bastard or something, puts a towel over his head. But they have this awesome like close up on Jason's face, and his eyes just sort of slowly move to the left to look at the guy, and you're like, oh, that's creepy.
That is creepy. Jason is creepy. I'm so pleased they've moved away from all that stupidity at Crystal Lake.
I know, try to make him menacing again.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who cares about all that stuff, you know, of him living in the, you know, drowning when he was 6 or whatever it was.
Crawling onto boats and killing people.
Anyway, it is what it is. So we've got Jason. Dr. Wimmer has kind of stormed in there. They then got guns aimed directly at Jason, but the sheet is kind of been put on Jason. So Dr. Wimmer says, get that thing off him straight away. They go and remove the sheet, and they realise that where Jason is meant to be has actually been shifted with the guard that was taunting him. So Jason had broken free, killed the guard, put him in his place, and put the sheet back over his head, and was clearly just hiding in the shadows until somebody came in to kind of take him away.
Because that's what Jason does.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it's just a great scene of him taking out the army dudes and then like spearing Cronenberg right through the stomach.
Yeah, no, he dies really quickly. I was surprised at that. Like, I remember when this film came out, I was right into my Cronenberg. Like, I loved Existence and Dead Ringers and The Fly. I thought he was just a gold filmmaker. So I seeked this film out simply because I was intrigued by the concept of Cronenberg acting. I was surprised he shows up right at the start. He dies within 3 or 4 minutes and he's not in the rest of the film. Probably not such a bad thing. I mean, he clearly wanted to get killed by Jason and his wish was granted, yeah?
Exactly right. And then it gets into the big chase, of course. Rowan is trying to get away from Jason. He's trying to stalk her down. They do drop the line that this facility is at Crystal Lake, though.
They do. They do.
They just built this facility out at Crystal Lake for some reason.
Yeah, I don't know why. What's it? Like, seriously.
But still, it's just like, you know, it's at least in part set at Crystal Lake. So
yeah,
it's that homage part coming out. And so he chases her down to this cryogenic freezing room.
Yep.
And she manages to trap him in there, but not before he gets one in on her. Stabs the machete through the tank, and it hits her in the stomach, and then all the cryogenic freezing stuff.
Just deep freeze stuff or whatever.
And they're
it is,
both trapped inside and get frozen.
Doesn't she say something like, oh, this is not good, or something like that? And she just sits there, and before you know it, she's asleep, man, just like Jason. And we don't see them again for, I'm just going to say right now, Corey, 445 years later. We jump from 2010 to 24 55. And the next shot we see is it's the room where they've been frozen in, and these people walk down the stairs and they're in these kind of weird outfits as per usual, as you'd expect, and they're like scavengers of some description. Is that the kind of what you kind of get? Is that right?
Well, yeah, but what it turns out to be, of course, is a group of teenagers on like some sort of field trip, I guess.
Yeah.
Maybe college-age students or something. And for extra credit, they've taken this ship to Earth, which is now a waste ground. And they've stumbled upon this facility, and they've gone in to investigate.
There's 3 students, and they're all being led by Professor Braithwaite Lowe, who's played by a guy named Jonathan Potts. Again, actors I've never heard of, and have, even to this day, I mean, you might have heard of a few of them, but most of them I've never heard of again.
Chuck Campbell, who plays Suneron, he also shows up in a lot of sci-fi TV. Most notably, I recognize him from Stargate Atlantis.
Oh, okay, nice. See, I've never watched those shows. I'm a Star Trek guy, dude. I really should give Stargate Atlantis a try. Apparently it's very good. But, you know, you're dead right. They're on this some kind of field trip, and they stumble upon this facility. They enter the Crystal Lake facility and find the still frozen Jason and Rowan, who they bring to the spaceship Grendel. And let's just say right now, Cory, that it's a coup that they found these specimens. They don't quite know what to make of it. Now, also keep in mind, too, that, I mean, you're dead right. They're teenagers. They're very horny. They all they want to do is sleep with each other. You've got like this smart-ass young guy who is just a bit of a dick and just always kind of gets himself into trouble and whatnot. Like he's clearly like a young guy. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, is he the one that gets his arm cut off?
Yeah, that's exactly.
Like the stoner kind of dude.
He's meant to be like the comic relief, but let's be truthful, he's not very funny.
Yeah, he knocks into Jason, who's got the machete raised above his head, and his frozen body comes down and cuts the guy's arm off. It's really just to set up the fact that they've got these nanobots that can like put your arm back on or heal your wounds or whatever.
Which I thought was a kind of a cool idea. I mean, like we've all seen medical kind of areas in futuristic films, and they all treat it kind of in a different way. But I didn't mind the whole nanobot kind of thing. The fact that if you're sick or injured, you got put in this table, and these nanobots just did the work, and before you knew it, you were kind of fixed and you were good as new. I mean, it was 400 years in the future. I mean, they certainly did their best. And let's be truthful too, the visual effects were not great. Like, they're not today's quality, but I certainly thought that they were believable enough. Yeah,
this isn't like high art
no,
or anything like that, but it's serviceable, you know, for what it is. It works perfectly fine. And yeah, you know, we get into the whole thing. They get back to the ship, and they all seem very excited that they can revive Rowan. They're convinced that Jason is very much dead, so they're just going to go ahead and have somebody perform an autopsy on him. But yeah, Rowan is revived.
You would actually give Jason to Lowe's intern, Adrian Thomas, who's played by this woman named Christy Angus. And she's ordered to dissect Jason's body. And she takes off his mask, and he's cutting into his head, and he's kind of she's doing all her best to try and get to the bottom of what's going on with Jason. And then we kind of have this scene that's integral, that's important to the plot, where Professor Lowe makes a phone call to someone who we're unaware of via some kind of video phone. And it turns out that he calls his financial backer, Dita Perez, who is played by Robert A. Silverman, and I'm sure Robert Silverman reminded me he was actually in Existence as well. I knew he was familiar. He played Darcy Nader in that film, so he's a regular working with Cronenberg. So it's pretty interesting that they were kind of put together. And it turns out that Dita Perez has actually heard of Jason, because he's talking to Lowe, and Lowe's trying to convince Perez of, I've got this perfect specimen, we just found him, you would never believe it, it's so important. And Perez is like, well, I don't really care, it could be anyone, like who cares, it's just someone else. And then he mentions the name Voorhees, and Perez goes, well, could that be Jason Voorhees? And Lowe's like, who's that? And then Perez kind of explains, it's like, well, it's actually this serial killer from the 20th century who actually killed 200 people and is famous for doing this. So I'd be shocked if they were still talking about him 400 years later, Cory, but that's okay. But then Professor Lowe has a light bulb moment that essentially he's worth money. And Lo's in debt and he needs help. So he decides to keep Jason on ice, although he doesn't realise he's been brought out, for use of a better term, keep him on ice and take him back to Earth 2 and sell him to the highest bidder. And that propels our narrative, which is essentially where all the trouble starts, yeah?
Exactly. And, they get to quick work laying out who everybody is, right? So Lo, I mean, he's the main one. He's the guy who wants to try and profit off Jason. They also have a weird scene of him with one of his students, Janessa. And she's doing this weird nipple clamps thing with him.
Oh, yes.
To try and pass, the class, I guess. So you've got that going on, and then there's like two horny kids, Stoney and Kinza, who just want to go and bone. And then there's all these like army people who have like chaperoned this field trip mission as well. So that's where the aliens kind of portion comes into it.
And keep in mind, you've got a robot on board as well. Her name is KM, and she's played by Lisa Ryder. Again, an actress that looked really familiar to me. I'm sure I'd seen her in other things for whatever reason, but I looked her up and I didn't really recognize much that she was in, but anyway.
And they kind of have this like weird flirtation going on with the guy who built her, Suneron. And like that's going to play out as the film goes on as well, weirdly enough. But yeah, so all this setup gets done pretty quickly. Rowan is revived. And they have this scene where she's talking with Lo, and he kind of plays dumb about Jason.
Yeah.
So she's kind of just, I guess, she's a little out of it. She's, I guess, just happy to be alive, and she doesn't have to worry about Jason. But immediately, she finds out that Jason's on the ship. Like,
totally freaks out.
Yeah, she's like, he's not dead. She lays out the whole thing. She says he's not dead. And while this is going on, sure enough, Jason springs back to life off the autopsy table, grabs Adrian, smashes her face into some liquid nitrogen, and smashes it on the counter.
I can't lie, Corey. I was impressed when I saw that.
It's a full-on kill in that. It's pretty good.
It's a full-on kill because he grabs her head and he pushes it towards the nitrogen, and clearly a digital effect, but her face instantly freezes. And it's a great effect, actually. I totally believed it. And he pulls it out really quickly and just smashes it without you even thinking, and half her face disappears. And you don't really see it. It's not really super gory, but you see it enough to know that it happened. And it was very impressive. Certainly one of the better kills in the whole series, yeah?
Yeah, I have to say, I think this could be like Kane Hodder at his best. And this is the last time Kane Hodder's going to play Jason in a Friday the 13th movie. So he's really settled into the role at this point. And he's just nailing the part of Jason, right? He's got it down pat.
No, totally down pat. He's totally killing it. And Jason is just charging. He's in big time kill mode. So he then takes a machete-shaped surgical tool from the medical bay and makes his way through the ship. And he stabs Stoney in the chest and actually drags him to his death, to Kinza's horror. That's actually pretty disturbing when that happens, because they're having sex at the time, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. They may as well have been, but apparently that's shot because he comes in, stabs him through the back, and then there's like a splat of blood.
Yeah.
Right on Kinza's face.
Yeah.
Apparently the actress wasn't quite expecting it when they got that shot, and it went right in her eyes. So her reaction was quite genuine.
So Sergeant Brodsky leads a group of soldiers to attack Jason, and this is when it gets full aliens.
Man, this guy, Peter Mensa, who plays Bronsky, I love this guy. He's so good in this part.
He's been in quite a lot too, isn't he? I've kind of just looking at his filmography now. I mean, he's done quite a bit. He was in Transformers, 300 Rise of an Empire, Avatar he was in, 300 the original one in 2007, Hidalgo. He's had a pretty interesting career. He's actually in the new Sleepy Hollow TV show as well, and Spartacus, True Blood, Star Trek Enterprise. He's done quite a lot, yeah?
He's a great guy, and I think he's a great fit for this. So, yeah, he kind of has a conversation with Lo about, maybe taking Jason alive. He's worth a lot of money. And then he immediately turns around and says, once we blow him to pieces, put him back on his feet. So we can say we tried. And it pretty much gets into the whole aliens part, you know, when they first get there and all the Marines are going to be taken out. Like, that's what this scene is. It starts off with actually the stoner dude, Azrael, and one of the army dudes. They're playing some sort of like hologram mind game or something, and Jason rocks up.
Yeah, totally. This is Star Trek on the holodeck.
Right.
It's just this really weird scene where Jason is on the holodeck and they're in the holodeck playing a game, but they're not in the space that Jason is kind of lunging towards. Like, so he'll kind of go and try and kill Azrael, or what's the other guy's name?
It was Dallas. Yeah, that's the one that was called Dallas.
But Jason can't kill the hologram, and then the hologram stops and the two guys are actually in a different part of the room. And it gets a bit confusing, but it's actually a pretty interesting sequence.
Yeah, when Azrael like jumps on his back and Jason sort of just flips him around and breaks his back across his knee.
Yeah, I know.
Like, that's full on. And then, yeah, all the army guys there, they're trying to take him out. And there's a whole bunch of kills here, right?
Totally.
There's one where Jason sort of just like grabs the dude and just snaps his neck, like real quiet like. And you're like, oh, that's...
It's pretty intense, isn't it?
That's classic Jason, right? But then, they get into some of, the machete style kills and stuff like that. But there's this one kill where he throws this guy, I think this, what was his name? Condor? He throws him like off a catwalk where he gets impaled on this weird like drill bit.
And he twists down the drill, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's like... That's super weird.
We quickly kind of escalate into the second half of the film. So do we want to maybe do a clip or something like that, man?
Yeah, let's check out some clips from the first half. So I've got Cronenberg here right at the beginning.
Nice.
What are you doing here?
I'm taking a specimen.
Well, you can't. I haven't prepped the cryostasis chamber.
I don't want them frozen, Rowan. I want them soft.
Nice.
Okay, I've got them discovering Jason in the cryotube.
What the hell is that? Humanoid. Organic composition is unclear.
Can someone tell me what's on his face?
Some kind of 20th century carbon filtration unit?
It's a hockey mask.
Nice. Oh, that's right. And then she says, hockey, yeah, that was the sport that been banned in, 2024 or something like that, I think he says.
Just to get a dig in on Canadians, probably.
Totally. Banned for its violence.
We kind of skipped over this guy, but the pilot of the ship who wears that red cowboy hat?
Yeah.
This guy's weird.
So what's she look like? Skip. Yeah. And single. I'm so lonely.
Nice. That's pretty good. It's fun.
Okay, that video chat when he's trying to find out how much money he could get from these specimens.
Oh, yeah.
I thought this line was very funny.
Nice.
Whoa, you bastard.
We've hit the mother lode.
Do you know what time it is?
I don't care. We've got a gold mine.
A box of DVDs is not a gold mine. I told you, I can't move them.
A box of DVDs is not a gold one. I told you, I can't move them. That's great, isn't it? Had Blu-ray shown up in 2002, dude? I don't think they had.
No.
I don't think they had.
Maybe HD DVD.
Yeah, maybe. The fact that they were still talking about DVDs, like, it really does age the film when they mention technology, isn't it?
Then we've got Lowe trying to convince him to take him alive.
What are we doing to find this guy?
Well, I promised the doc we'd take him alive. So, after you blow him all to hell, put on his legs so we can say we tried.
Yeah.
Nice.
I love the call.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's good.
And then this line about the drill bit kill.
Yeah, nice.
Sarge, we found Condor.
What's his condition?
He's screwed.
Yeah, he's screwed. I remember when they said that film, I kind of grimaced to myself slightly when they said that.
I know. And they've all got names like that, because there's like Dallas, right? But then there was like Condor, Gecko, Kicker, Briggs. It's just like, what?
I know. Anyway, so we've got our, Professor Lowe. He apparently orders Pilot Lou to dock in on an upcoming kind of space station called Solaris, as you say. So as he's actually talking with the Solaris engineer, he's actually hacked apart very violently by Jason, and with no pilot to actually steer the ship or stop the ship or do anything, it actually crashes into this crazy space station. And they do their best to try and make this as action-packed as possible with the tools that they have. I mean, clearly they didn't have, $30 million for this sequence. Like, if this film was made today with, like, A-list actors and called something different, and they had $30 million, it would be a totally different sequence. But this film had $11 million to shoot their film back in 2002, and they had to destroy a space station with a ship. And with the use of miniatures and digital effects, they do their best, and you do believe it. I mean, I think it's pretty easy. I mean, we've had this this conversation before, Cory, of looking at older films with little to no budget and actually judging their VFX based on the money that they're spending. But it's pretty easy to do that because, I mean, as we've said 1,000 times, all you have to do is just believe that what's happening in front of you is actually happening. Even if it doesn't look that great, you just got to accept it. And if you do accept it, then the film has done what it's meant to do. And the fact that they actually tried to destroy a space station, and the pilot gets killed by Jason, and you can actually hear the person on the intercom on the other side of his headset sort of saying, "You need to slow down. You're going too fast. What's going on? Why are you going so fast?" And the ship goes straight into the space station, and it goes onto the other side, and they not only damage it, they actually blow up the space station. It's pretty full on, yeah?
Now, do you reckon this should count against Jason's list of kills? Because you'd have to think there's probably a lot of people on that space station. If Jason's responsible, he's probably just met his current quota of apparently 200 people killed in one blow here.
It's a hard one because I can't imagine Jason intended for that to occur, but I mean, he knew what he was doing when he killed the pilot, and he knew what he was trying to, he was trying to dock the station at the dock the spaceship at the station. And as much as it's kind of been alluded to several times in previous films that Jason may not be the smartest guy in the world, I think they've said to it that he's got a really small brain or something like that. I think they've said that once or twice. He's not a dummy. He knows when he's being had. He'll kind of pull you apart if you try to. Don't you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. So, yeah, he's on it.
Totally.
But then, the next scene, he goes ahead and kills Professor Lowe. And it's this weirdly comedic scene where he's trying to decide whether or not he wants to continue using this machete or get his old classic machete.
And doesn't Professor Lowe try to negotiate with Jason? Doesn't he try to just say, "Hey man, you're worth a lot of money. I can get you all the money in the world that you need," and stuff like that. He's trying to say anything he can to not have Jason kill him, essentially, yeah?
It's quite funny. I thought it was a funny scene.
He's trying to get the machete, and Professor Lotus says, "You want this? You can have it. It's yours. Take it. It's yours," or something like that. And he's really desperately trying to squirm out the situation, but I think he does end up taking the machete, doesn't he? He reclaims it, and he ends up decapitating Professor Lowe. So that's the last time we see that character. So the ship is now badly damaged after destroying the space station Solaris, and the remaining survivors head for the shuttle, while Sonaron heads elsewhere with KM-14.
He kind of goes off with her to, I guess, work on something while they're trying to get to the ship, right?
We kind of find out what they've been working on a little bit later on. Is that right?
Yeah, well, earlier in the film, she was asking for some boobs.
That's
so
right.
he was trying to make nipples for her or something, and they kept falling off.
Yeah, I know.
And they, some of the other students, I think particularly Kinza, was making, sex bot jokes and stuff. And it pretty much gets to that point where they end up making out with each other.
So after we find Professor Lowe's remains, Crutch and Waylander actually prepare the shuttle. Crutch and Waylander, they're the two, they actually go towards where the pilot was, and they have to they have to set it to kind of autopilot or some description, and they're like, "Oh, we have to do this," and they kind of get there, and they're desperately trying to make it happen, and then at the 11th hour, Jason ends up finding them, doesn't he?
Yeah, so they're all running around, and of course, like, I think she goes looking for Bronski, and then they've got Kinza in the ship, and she, I think she commits suicide, right? Like, there's this whole thing about how she's going to take the ship, she locks them out, and it looks like she's going to take the ship, but I think she actually commits suicide. Like, she intentionally crashes the ship.
Well, in my synopsis, it says, on board the shuttle, Kinza has a panic attack and launches the shuttle without releasing the fuel line, causing it to crash into the ship's hull and explode, killing her.
I mean, I couldn't take that as an accident. I know, just the look on her face at the end, I kind of felt like she knew what she was doing.
Yeah.
And it was suicide.
Anyway, so we've still got Jason kind of running around. Brodsky actually attacks Jason.
So Rowan had found him alive, and she goes to get Waylander to help her, like, carry him away. But he disappears, right? After she leaves and comes back and he's gone. And that's when KM shows up, and she's been sort of like kitted out Lara Croft style.
Yeah, in total, like, badass gear. Like, she's got guns everywhere. She's in, like, high heel, kind of black leather, S&M kind of gear. Like, she's gotten changed, and she's being a total smart ass. And I've got to say, the actress who played her, Lisa Ryder, does a pretty good job. I think she certainly does her best with the tools that she kind of has, and she turns into a total A-grade badass, and she kills Jason for what they think kills Jason anyway. So she pumps 1,000 rounds into him, and then she brings out the big guns, and she takes off a leg and takes off an arm, and then she attacks Jason's heads and just blows it to smithereens. And next thing you know, Jason's in kind of one part of the ship, totally in a million pieces, looking very, very dead. Or at least we think he is anyway. And it's only after the survivors set, explosive charges to separate the remaining pontoon from the main drive section. As they actually work, Jason is actually accidentally brought back to life by the damaged medical station. So the nanobots come back into the game. They actually go to Jason's body, and they go all over his body, and they do whatever they have to do, and they don't just fix Jason, they improve him, which is the last thing you want to happen. And I can't lie, man, I enjoyed this section. Like, I think I was reading online that a lot of people thought this was silly and ridiculous, but I quite enjoyed the concept of Uber Jason and the metal mask. And, like, he really did turn into he's always been unstoppable, but he was really unstoppable when he was improved, yeah? What do you think?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, like, I know we were complaining about, the last time we saw Jason and that mask being part of his face and stuff, but this time there's an explanation behind it. And sure, it's goofy, and these nanobots have brought him back to life and rebuilt him, but it's cool, right? We've had this, like, classic Jason throughout the film, and now we've got Uber Jason, as they call him.
I think it's really cool, and they go to a lot of effort to try and set it up. I mean, with the use of nanobots several times throughout the kind of film, and as much as we said, as much as the digital effect is a bit, 10, 15 years ago, the effect is good enough to make you believe it, and the story mechanic is interesting enough to actually make you kind of understand and actually just go with it. So the nanobots get over Jason's body, they turn him into Uber Jason, and he then comes back to the students and KM14 and all that kind of stuff. And you got this really cool sequence where Uber Jason shows up, and they say to KM14, do you think you can beat it? And she says, I'll try.
Yeah, her guns are, like, no longer effective. It's given him, like, this metal armor across his chest and stuff.
Doesn't she say, he's had improvements or something like that?
Yeah.
And Jason easily defeats KM14 by literally punching her head off. I mean, isn't that a throwback to Jason Takes Manhattan, to that fight they have on the top where he punches the head off of that guy that's desperately trying to, like, punch him? It's weird.
But she doesn't die.
No, she doesn't, because she's a robot.
Yeah, so they're carrying her head around and stuff. And I think Waylander gets killed pretty much at this point as well. And while they're running, they try to create this diversion on the holodeck, which they also set up earlier. And they have this throwback to Camp Crystal Lake, circa 1980s.
It was really strange when I was watching it because you got these, and this is where you got your opening line from, where you got these two teenagery kind of girls who saying, "Hi man, do you want to, I love premarital sex. Why don't you come get down with me and do all that kind of stuff.
Smoke some pot."
Yeah, I love all that. And it's totally over the top, and it's bordering on ridiculous, but it is a holodeck. It's meant to be ridiculous.
Well, and at the same time, another throwback where he's got them both in their sleeping bags and he's beating one with the other.
Yeah.
Didn't he do that once? He picked up that chick in the sleeping bag and hit her against the tree.
I'm pretty sure he did do that once before, but he does it a lot more effectively in this film because he's like it's a lot more tongue in cheek, isn't it?
Yeah, let's beat one girl to death with the other girl.
Exactly. So,
so yeah, and then it's just the big crescendo, right? Like another ship shows up and says that you can come onto my ship, but they can't get the doors open and all this. So Bronsky has to go on like a spacewalk to try and fix the electronics or whatever.
He somehow kind of gets outside, and without kind of going too into it, he desperately tries to get it fixed, and he does get it fixed, doesn't he? He actually gets the doors to release, doesn't he?
But he doesn't make it back in time, and the whole station explodes. So the only people who got away were Rowan, Suneron, and KM's head. But Jason's still coming at them. Like he's being blasted away from the exploding ship at the escape shuttle, but at the last second, Bronsky comes in and pushes Jason down through Earth 2's atmosphere.
Yeah, through the atmosphere. And the end of the film is they kind of cut to Earth 2, and you got these teenagers who sitting on this lake of some, this unnamed kind of lake, and they go, "Hey, a shooting star." And they look up at the sky, and this thing flies towards the Earth and crashes. I don't recall if they see the crash, but they certainly know that it's landed.
Yeah,
and
in the lake.
Yeah. and don't they say, "Hey, we should go and check that out"?
So Jason's in the future, ready to slaughter a bunch of new teens at a lake somewhere on Earth 2.
And that's it. That's the end of Jason X.
So let's check out some more clips, eh?
Let's do it.
So I've got Low with the machete.
Nice.
You want your machete back? Shit, it's yours. Take it. Just remember who saved it for you. Guys, it's okay. He just wanted his machete back. Woo!
I like how he said, "Guys, he just wanted his machete back. That's all he wanted."
We're safe now. You can come back.
That's right. Very funny.
I thought this line was very funny too when Suneron steps out to introduce KM in all her badassness.
"Hey, Slappy! Got a little something for you."
Nice.
But then he says this about KM.
"Gave her an upload."
I gave her an upload.
An upload?
What?
Oh, yeah, I know.
You mean upgrade, maybe?
I'm assuming it's an upgrade, but that's a strange phrase. An upload. Okay.
We even kind of skipped over poor Kinz's death, but she got sucked out of a hole in the wall.
Oh, she did too. I forgot about that. And she's desperately trying to hang on, isn't she? And she her arm reaches out, and she's desperately trying to get someone's kind of fingertips, and she just can't summon the energy, and she just gives up essentially. She gets sucked in through this hole, literally straight through the hole, blown into a million pieces. Oh my God, it's crazy.
She says a line from the 90s, which this was so 90s, it's ridiculous. But this is what she says just before she dies.
Nice.
Oh, this sucks on so many levels!
It's kind of funny, yeah.
It's supposed to be the future.
I know.
Going to throw back to the 90s.
To the 90s, that's all right.
I've got those two hologram girls.
Cool.
Hey, you want a beer?
Or do you want to smoke some pot?
Or we can have premarital sex.
We love premarital sex.
Nice. It's pretty funny.
And then here's the last clip.
We landed in the lake. Let's go check it out.
Let's go and check it out. Exactly. And you know what, man? I wish they made more of these movies. I really do. Like, in the future, I really enjoyed the setting, if you know what I mean. It was good.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of fun. So, ratings, recommend, what do you say?
Yeah, this to me is a strong recommend. I really liked it. Like, I liked it a lot more than I thought it would. If you like science fiction and Star Trek and whatnot, like, this really was just as much fun as kind of like a good Star Trek episode or a good Battlestar Galactica episode. Like, it really was in that wheelhouse, and they were clearly striving to go towards like Alien and whatnot, like as we mentioned in our discussion. And they don't quite get there. Like, I'm not going to say it's as good as that. It's not, but they really do their best. It's refreshing. I mean, I think the common thread of me watching all these Jason films is whenever they shift environments, it's always refreshing, and it's nice to kind of see. The few occasions they've kind of done it has always kind of been good. Whenever they kind of go back to Crystal Lake, it's fine and we like it, but it's just more of the same. We've seen it before, where I've never seen Jason in space before, and the whole concept of Uber Jason and the nanobots, I thought it was a really clever way to try and evolve the character of Jason Voorhees and turn him into something new and interesting that I as a audience member would be interested in kind of watching. I kind of wish this was more of a pilot for a TV show than a film, because I'd be totally happy to watch a season of this or something like that than just have this as like a standalone and never visit this environment again. I mean, I know we've got Freddy versus Jason next week, and I'm looking forward to watching that, but I'm kind of expecting it to be more like Camp Crystal Lake and less Battlestar Galactica, which I really like. From a ratings perspective, I think I'm going to give this about 7.5 Uber Jasons. I think that's where I'm at. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. You know, I'm very happy that, you know, these guys came along and they said, hey, we've been waiting forever for you guys to get around, get your act together and make this Freddy versus Jason movie. It's been going since the 80s. We got Jason Goes to Hell in 93. So 8 years later, I think, you know, these guys just had a genuine passion for the Jason series, and they made this loving homage while doing this tongue-in-cheek space comedy. You know, to throw Jason in space. Why not? Let's see if we can make it work. And I think they succeeded. I think they really did. I've seen a few horror franchises where they've gone to space. They did it in Hellraiser. They did it with Leprechaun. Michael Myers never quite got there, but you know, those films were like, whatever. This one, I think they really pulled it off nicely, and it's up there with one of the best in my opinion. So yeah, I think I might go ahead and give this 8 nitrogen faces.
Nice.
It's totally worth it.
I think we roughly agree. The thing I liked the most about it is this was a real pleasant surprise. Like, I wasn't expecting much, truthfully. When I put this on, I was not expecting a good or great film. I was expecting something equally gory and violent as the previous film, and not nearly as interesting. And as much as I know it's ridiculous, man, like I'm not stupid, Cory. I realize the premise is ridiculous. Like the concept of Jason being deep freezed and then 400 years later a scavenger crew finding him and taking him into a ship, and all the shenanigans kind of happen. Like I know it sounds ridiculous, but as I've said, man, if you just accept it and can just watch it and just accept it on its own terms, you're going to have fun. If you're going to sit there and pick at the pieces, well, there's no use watching it. Just turn it off. It's not your film.
All right, so next week, it's taken them the better part of 20 years.
Yeah, I know.
But we're finally going to get around to 2003's Freddy vs. Jason.
I remember this being a big film, like as in not ginormous big, but certainly anticipated. Let's just put it that way. So
exactly.
I have seen this film 10 years ago, but I have not revisited it. So I'm looking forward to watching it next week.
Nice one. All right, guys. So for more great podcasts from Golden Spiral Media, make sure you head over to goldenspiralmedia.com/Apple. And you can join us on Facebook at facebook.com/rewatchpodcast and on Twitter at rewatchpod. And also, your rate and reviews are always very much appreciated. So if you could take a few seconds out of your day and give us a rate and review on your podcast app of choice, that would be amazing of you.
That would be rock solid gold. Do it.
All right. So thank you for joining me for this discussion, Nathan.
No worries.
And it just leaves me to say, until next time, you're lucky you weren't alive during the Microsoft conflict.
Talk about dating a film. Why don't you stare at this for a while, you ugly bastard?
Golden Spiral Media and the Rewatch podcast are not associated with the copyright holders of these films, and no copyright infringement is intended.
They were making love while that young boy drowned.
The use of any and all copyrighted material is solely for parody, news analysis, critique, or educational purposes, as provided in United States Code Title 17, aka Fair Use.
It's gonna take more than a poke in the ribs to put down this old dog.
Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com.
Cool, JJ. Parents really came through.
Copyright 2017, Golden Spiral Media.
You a dead meat slime bag.